So my capillary temperature gauge, combined temperature gauge and oil gauge, failed on my Stag. This is the yellow Stag. This is my second Stag, and so I decided this car doesn't. This is a manual temperature gauge. When it did work, was pretty reliable, stayed pretty steady. So I decided to go back to the original temperature gauge that came with the car. Now, I did decide to keep the oil gauge. Well, I actually had an old oil gauge. The face sort of disintegrated, but I took it apart, cleaned it up. With the Stag, at least I know the oil gauge is moving. I just put it in this vent. But one thing I did when I put the engine, when I put the capillary, when I knew I was going to put the capillary temperature gauge in there, I tied off the I think it's the blue and green wire that went into the sensor thing in the engine block. So I've had to I couldn't since I tied it up, wrapped it up with electrical tape, I can't undo it. So I'm now having to run a new line from the temperature sensor through the dashboard into the temperature gauge itself. Now, I did part out a Mark 1 Triumph Stag, and I have the wiring loom, and so I actually try and hack up the wiring and use the same colors as possible, as much as possible. But I wasn't able to get the exact color all the way through. So what I did was I found a yellow and white wire, and I've joined it up to the actual temperature colored wire, and I'm going to use um, a sleeve, a black sleeve, to cover it, so you won't really know what color is the cable underneath. Now, one of the things that I started trying was I like to solder my wires together, and I've been seeing these various type of things on the various Facebook forums and other types of forums where there's these things that you have that incorporate heat shrink and solder. So I actually decided to buy a packet of Alibaba, and I'm pretty happy with it. This is the blue color to represent the gauge of wire. So I actually joined the correct temperature wire to a non-correct temperature wire, color wire, and you need to use a heat source to solder these together. So what I've noticed is that the heat shrink tubing shrinks first, and then the solder starts to melt after. And I have a Harbor Freight $10 heat gun over there. Works pretty well. This is my second one. And so I'm pretty happy with this. As I said, it's all insulated with the shrink wrap, and it's soldered, so this is good. And so if you need to do any electrical wiring, you may consider using these things. So that's it for this one. Hopefully, once I get my original temperature gauge working, it'll be good.